Yeah, so the legislature is set to have joint hearings with the Senate and the House, sort of a select group of representatives and senators in both chambers that'll be meeting next week with state economists, some national experts on tax policy to consider, what next steps look like. Obviously, the House of Representatives passed a bill out of their chamber that would have eliminated the income tax. But I think what we've said all along is that was a great start to a broader conversation that needs to happen. That bill certainly has some good bones to it. I think for this to be successful long term, you're going to have to see larger buy-in. The public has got to understand the benefit that is available to them. I think business groups have to understand the benefit ultimately to the economy. And then you've got to have political buy-in, right? People need to see that they have an opportunity to have input and ultimately to help shape what gets across the finish line. So you got to have the Senate bought in, you got to have the governor bought in. And I think this hearing date, or two days of hearings essentially, is a good start to that. It's a good opportunity for other people to kind of put their mark on the conversation.
Talk a little bit about income tax repeal, why we support it. What do you see as the good to come from it besides just people saving money?
So the devil's in the details, right? It matters how you do it. But if it can be done well, the elimination of the income tax is a bold move that I think puts Mississippi in a more competitive place. And I'm not basing that off of sort of mindless speculation. I'm basing it off of the fact that we know there are 9 states that operate without an income tax. And by and large, those 9 states are thriving in a way that not only puts Mississippi to shame economically, but puts the rest of the country to shame economically. You've seen GDP growth that far outpaces national average in those 9 states, which is the size of the overall economy. You've seen wage growth that's outpacing averages across the country. And most importantly, you've seen population growth that is more than double the national average over the last 10 years in the states that don't have income taxes. And so people are literally moving with their feet and they're bringing capital with them. And that's a sort of injection or surplus into the economy that can't be undersold. I mean, I think I said this last week. There has never once been an economy that's grown without population growth. Well, Mississippi is losing population. We're one of 3 states that over the last decade have lost population. And to make matters worse, if you really look at the details of the population inflows and outflows in Mississippi, we are losing the portion of the population that is productive, the portion of the population that is working age, and we are gaining a portion of the population that is at retirement. Well, that's a great thing that retirees see Mississippi as a good place to live, but the balance has got to be such that you've got more people pulling the cart, not fewer people pulling the economic cart. And right now we're at real risk of losing more and more people that are pulling that cart. So the income tax policy is something that we've had economists look at. We've worked with national partners that work on tax policy, and we believe that it can create more jobs. We believe that it can create higher paying jobs. We believe that it can create a larger, more vibrant economy, and part of that is the attraction of people into the state. And if you start in a place where you're one of a handful that aren't doing so well, it's important that you're willing to take those kind of bold steps.
And I'm being a little facetious when I ask this, but one of the concerns or complaints or whatever you want to call it from opponents is it'll gut government. So tell us how that's not true. Tell us how these states, I mean, you sort of mentioned it. Tennessee, Florida, Texas are neighbors relatively close to us, some very close to us. I mean, how are these states doing? How are they getting by without an income tax?
Yeah, so the crazy thing is, if you look at Mississippi's tax burden, it's pretty high as a percentage of our overall economy. If you look at the tax burden in the states that don't have income taxes, it's basically half of what Mississippi's is on average, the tax burden. So you would say, okay, well, they're collecting a lot less in taxes. And the answer to that is no, they're not. State revenue is actually growing in those states. Why is that? It's because their actual economy, their private sector economy, is growing at a pace that far eclipses ours. So lower tax burden, but a government that is actually getting funded at a higher rate year by year because the economy itself is growing. And that's the scenario that you want to play out, not necessarily a larger government, but a recognition that you can fund the things that you need in government, assuming the private economy is working the way it's supposed to.
What do you hope to see at the hearings next week?
I hope it's an open discussion. I hope people don't come in so tied into their own ideas about the way that this has to be done that there's not room for some maneuvering. I said earlier that the devil's in the details. I think that's true. I mean, I think obviously one of the goals of this should be to keep our taxes as low as possible, our overall tax burden as low as possible to afford the government. I think it's got to be a broad-based tax policy. It shouldn't be put on the shoulders of one group of people. I think it's got to be simple and transparent, and that's one of the nice things about consumption or sales taxes, is that you don't have all the complexity of income taxes. And I think it's, to the extent possible, needs to be behavior neutral, which is saying that you don't implement taxes that affect certain industries or certain products in a way more harshly than the rest of the economy. You truly trust the free market to work by taxing people at a relatively flat rate.